The Ukrainian army has succeeded. In recent days, the Ukrainian military has intensified its operations along the front line, placing serious pressure on Russian forces, particularly around Kostiantynivka. Heavy fighting continues in the area while Ukrainian troops are reportedly increasing the frequency of their attacks, launching simultaneous operations from different directions, and testing the strength of Russian defensive lines. The sight of Ukrainian flags once again flying in the occupied city of Kostiantynivka has become one of the most striking developments on the battlefield. Images of Ukrainian soldiers posing with their national flags in a city that had long remained under intense Russian pressure significantly boosted the morale of Ukrainian troops and created a strong sense of motivation among the Ukrainian public. After putting the Russian army under considerable pressure in recent days, the Ukrainian military continues its attacks and battlefield operations without slowing down. While this development has become both a military and psychological setback for Russian forces, it has further strengthened the confidence and fighting spirit of the Ukrainian army. When the Russian army established control over Kostiantynivka, one of Ukraine's strategically important cities, during the later stages of the war, it placed significant pressure on Ukraine's defensive capabilities and operational limits. The city has long held great importance for both sides because of its location surrounding transportation routes and the strategic advantages it provides to forces operating along the front line. Russia and Ukraine issued conflicting statements regarding control of Kostiantynivka, while independent sources continued to report that fighting inside the city was ongoing and that the situation remained unclear. However, the latest reports and videos shared on social media indicate that Ukrainian forces carried out a large-scale clearance operation in the central part of Kostiantynivka in the Donetsk region. Following the operation, the Ukrainian national flag was reportedly raised over one of the city's buildings, while 16 central districts were said to have returned to Ukrainian control. Russian officials have not yet issued a detailed statement regarding these developments. At the same time, numerous Ukrainian soldiers were reportedly seen sharing photographs and videos from the area while holding Ukrainian flags. These images quickly spread across social media, and the renewed presence of Ukrainian troops in the city center led to suggestions that Russian control over the area may have been much weaker than previously believed. The fact that the Russian army has gradually lost several areas where it had previously established pressure or claimed full control shows that its resistance on the battlefield may be weakening and that it is no longer advancing as effectively as it did during earlier stages of the war. Images released in connection with the operation also show how Russian forces had concentrated in parts of Kostiantynivka, described as the city's private residential sector, where some Russian units were reportedly deployed in small groups. These positions were later detected and attacked by Ukrainian drones. The active use of reconnaissance drones in the region made it easier for Ukrainian forces to identify positions where Russian soldiers attempted to hide. Once detected, these locations were targeted by strike drones, artillery fire, or Ukrainian ground units. Another video released by the regiment showed Russian forces being defeated inside the city and Ukrainian soldiers continuing their advance. The footage appeared to show several buildings and streets being secured, Russian positions being cleared, and Ukrainian troops moving toward the central districts. The 425th Separate Assault Regiment announced that Ukrainian forces had completed their assigned combat mission and cleared the central part of the settlement. In a video released after the operation, one of the soldiers said, "The 425th Skala Regiment has completed its combat mission. The Ukrainian city of Kostiantynivka is once again under the blue and yellow flag. We will continue working until Ukraine is completely liberated. Glory to Ukraine!" This statement suggested that Ukrainian troops had not merely entered a specific location to record symbolic footage, but had carried out a planned combat mission aimed at clearing Russian elements from the city center. The soldiers' emphasis that operations would continue until the complete liberation of Ukraine showed that the unit viewed this development not as a temporary success, but as part of a much broader objective. The regiment also emphasized that operations aimed at liberating Ukrainian territory were continuing and that its units would maintain their activities in the region. On July 3rd, Russian President Vladimir Putin claimed that Kostiantynivka had been captured, that the Luhansk region had been liberated, and that Russian forces had made significant progress in the Donetsk region. However, the Institute for the Study of War, also known as ISW, rejected these claims and reported that the Russian presence inside Kostiantynivka was limited to small sabotage groups that had infiltrated between Ukrainian defensive positions. According to this assessment, the Russian army had not established full and organized control over the city, but had only managed to insert small groups into several locations. Ukrainian forces later reportedly detected and eliminated these groups one by one before re-establishing control in the central part of the city. Losing battlefield gains one after another can be extremely damaging for any army. Since the beginning of the war, reports have suggested that many Russian soldiers were unwilling to participate in combat, reluctant to carry out assault missions, or had lost their motivation after spending long periods on the front line. For soldiers already fighting under conditions of exhaustion and low morale, the loss of territories that had previously been captured created even greater psychological pressure. When a settlement taken at the cost of heavy casualties is lost again within a short period, soldiers may begin to believe that their sacrifices have produced no lasting result. This can reduce their willingness to fight and may lead to reluctance in following assault orders, a greater tendency to abandon positions, and weaker resistance during defensive operations. The presence of large numbers of Russian soldiers with low morale, inadequate training, or limited ability to adapt to battlefield conditions has created serious problems during both offensive and defensive operations. When coordination between units breaks down, even a relatively small defensive line can collapse within a short time. Delays in carrying out orders, units acting without proper communication, and necessary reinforcements failing to arrive on time can make it easier for Ukrainian forces to achieve results through rapid attacks. As Ukrainian troops became increasingly aware of these weaknesses, they began launching consecutive strategic and sudden operations. Some attacks targeted small settlements along the front line, while others focused directly on supply routes, ammunition depots, command centers, and locations where Russian troops were concentrated. While Ukrainian soldiers continue their ground operations to liberate occupied cities inside their own territory, they are also using long-range strike systems and drones to attack military targets inside Russia. This two-directional pressure forces the Russian military to defend both the front line and areas far behind it. While Russian units attempt to stop Ukrainian assaults in forward positions, fuel facilities, ammunition depots, air bases, and logistical centers can also become targets of Ukrainian drone attacks. As a result, Russia's ability to support its troops at the front is weakened, while the burden on existing units continues to grow. The recent successes of the Ukrainian army are closely connected to this multi-directional pressure, faster intelligence sharing, and the expanded use of drones. Losing territories that had previously been occupied has pushed many Russian soldiers into a serious psychological state of defeat on the battlefield. Units forced to retreat after suffering heavy losses have begun to weaken significantly in terms of both morale and willingness to continue fighting. The rapid loss of strategic positions that were believed to be firmly under control has undermined confidence in military operations and directly affected both defensive and offensive capabilities. When a soldier no longer believes that his position can be held, that support will arrive, or that commanders are making the correct decisions, even a limited enemy attack may be enough to make him consider retreating. For this reason, confidence on the battlefield is just as important as weapons and ammunition. While Russian forces have lost large numbers of armored vehicles, artillery systems, ammunition depots, and logistical assets, they have also been forced to operate under the psychological pressure created by these losses. The growing shortage of equipment on the battlefield has disrupted coordination between units and significantly reduced their operational effectiveness. Infantry forces advancing without armored vehicle support become far more vulnerable in open terrain, while shortages of artillery ammunition prevent sufficient preparatory fire from being carried out before an assault. The destruction of logistical vehicles and fuel depots also limits the mobility of troops operating on the front line. When all these shortages occur at the same time, even a force that appears numerically powerful can become ineffective in actual combat. The intense pressure placed on soldiers by their commanders, disciplinary measures introduced after unsuccessful operations, and harsh orders issued by senior leadership have further increased the burden on troops serving at the front. In war, preserving morale and motivation is just as important as limiting physical casualties. However, Russian forces appear to be moving in the opposite direction, operating under increasingly severe psychological pressure, constantly receiving orders to attack, being forbidden from retreating, failing to defend captured territories, and being unable to retake lost positions can seriously weaken the desire of soldiers to continue fighting. When responsibility for failed operations is placed directly on lower-ranking soldiers, confidence in the command structure also begins to decline. Communication problems along the front line, logistical disruptions, and delays in the arrival of reinforcements are among the other factors increasing the pressure on Russian forces. When units cannot communicate effectively with one another, it becomes more difficult to identify the direction of Ukrainian attacks in time. Reinforcements arriving late or being sent to the wrong location can allow gaps in defensive lines to expand. Irregular deliveries of ammunition, food, water, and medical supplies also reduce the amount of time soldiers can remain in position and weaken their ability to resist. When these problems occur together, Russian forces are forced to fight not only against Ukrainian attacks but also against the disorder and weaknesses within their own military system. From a military perspective, consecutive failures do not only produce negative consequences at the tactical level, they also create serious operational and strategic problems. Declining confidence among units suffering constant losses, a reduced ability to take initiative, and an unwillingness to accept risks are all factors that directly affect battlefield performance. When commanders become afraid of failure, they make decisions more slowly. When soldiers no longer want to participate in attacks, the overall pace of operations decreases. This slowdown gives the opposing side additional time to strengthen its defenses, deploy new units, and prepare new attacks. The Ukrainian army is attempting to take advantage of this slower Russian decision-making process by launching rapid and unexpected operations. The repeated transfer of the same areas between opposing forces also shows how fragile defensive lines have become. When a settlement changes hands several times within a short period, it becomes clear that neither side has been able to establish a permanent defensive structure in that area. This creates further uncertainty for soldiers' position at the front. The possibility that a position held today could be lost tomorrow weakens the soldiers' attachment to that area and reduces their belief in the success of the defense. It may also lead to poor coordination between units, declining trust in the chain of command, and a weakening sense of duty. When soldiers believe that an order is unrealistic, their willingness to carry it out decreases and discipline within the unit begins to deteriorate. Consecutive failures can quickly produce psychological defeat in any army during a war. Units that lose the battle for morale cannot maintain operations at the required level regardless of how many soldiers or powerful weapons they possess. Victory in modern warfare is not achieved through firepower alone. Discipline, coordination, accurate intelligence, uninterrupted logistical support, rapid decision-making, and most importantly, high morale are all essential factors that directly influence the outcome of a conflict. Soldiers who trust themselves, believe in their mission, and feel that strong support stands behind them can resist for much longer. In contrast, units that are constantly retreating, suffering losses, and losing confidence in their commanders can gradually become ineffective even if they possess advanced weapons. For this reason, every failure on the battlefield means far more than the loss of a position or a few kilometers of territory. It becomes a critical psychological factor that erodes the willingness of soldiers to fight, places pressure on the command structure, and directly affects the long-term success of military operations. The developments around Kostiantynivka are therefore highly important. The Ukrainian Army's renewed display of its flag in the city center and its announcement that Russian elements had been cleared from the area boosted Ukrainian morale while increasing pressure on Russian troops. Whether this success can be maintained, whether permanent control can be established in the city, and how the Russian army will respond will become clearer in the coming days. For now, however, the current situation suggests that the Ukrainian army is no longer operating only as a defensive force along the front line. It has begun to regain the initiative in areas where suitable conditions emerge. Reconnaissance conducted by drones, the rapid movement of small assault groups, and the systematic targeting of Russian forces inside the city demonstrate that Ukrainian units are using their battlefield experience more effectively. At the same time, the Russian army's difficulty in establishing permanent control over areas it claims to have captured suggests that pressure on its forces may continue to increase in the coming period. For Ukraine, every liberated area represents not only a military gain, but also a powerful message that occupied cities can eventually be reclaimed. Do not forget to subscribe to NLY Military and turn on video notifications so that you do not miss the latest military developments and breaking news from the Russia-Ukraine war.